It's not very often that we get to go on a virtual field trip. So I'm excited that we get to go on a virtual field trip today to iRobot. And Lisa, thank you so much for having us.
Awesome. So yes, this is the screen that we'll be using the whole time. So if you want to pin that or spotlight it or whatever you do, that's the way to do it. We're going to be visiting iRobot's Cool Stuff Museum. So I'm going to be taking you through. We're in Bedford, Mass. So not too far from you guys. You're going to be seeing the museum through Ava. Ava is a telepresence robot that we built a number of years ago. But the screen here is just your standard web interface screen. Your video feed is coming to you from her camera on the very top. The robot's pretty much from the neck on down. She has sensors in her belly and down at her feet, and those sensors enable her to build a map. And so her map on my iPad looks, let's do that, something like that. You guys are the green dot. Those numbers are other places that I can tap in the museum to send the robot autonomously to get there. You'll see that as we drive through the museum, she has what we call obstacle avoidance, so she won't hit me. She's not super fast, but we don't need her zipping around the entire office to do that. As we go through, if you have questions, please just come off mute and ask your questions or save them for the end. I cannot see the chat from where I am, and so if you put them in the chat, they have to wait till the very end. And we'll also go through some at the end as well. All right, so I'm going to send Ava now down to the far end of the museum. So I've tapped one of those numbers. You can see that if I do get in her way, she stops and she's going to work on avoiding me. I'll meet her down at this far end. So on the wall behind me, you can see there's a lot of different robots. That is kind of how we got started, in the industry. When you start a company, you don't know that Roomba is going to be the thing that changes the world and is your biggest seller. Obviously, you have to try all different things. I, kind of make the analogy to going on Netflix. You don't know exactly what movie you're going to like. So you try a bunch of movies, you watch some trailers, and you move on to the final thing. For us, we did things like toys. We had some telepresence, moved into some research, other defense and security robots, and then down there at the far end of some of our largest robots we built, things that later worked in defense and security. When you get started, though, in robotics, you always build a prototype. Prototype is how you start every project. I'm going to see if I can get you guys lined up. All right, so the prototype that I'm going to show you in the box here is actually our very first robot. We did this in pre-1990. This is actually Colin's undergraduate thesis. Colin is our CEO. This robot, as you can see, is a prototype, which means it doesn't have all the bells and whistles. It's not finished. It doesn't have everything that you would expect the robot itself to have, but you've got chopsticks, duct tape, rulers, motors, things you would have around the lab, and that becomes the genesis of the robot itself. What we were exploring there was the motion of the legs, and the robot became a robot here named Genghis. Genghis is a six-legged walking robot with cameras and bump sensors. The robot would have legs that moved, and it would go up to the planets, gather data, and send that data back. So this is actually how we started. We were going to be a space exploration company. Obviously, we gave that some thought, and space exploration isn't necessarily the way to start a robotics company because we weren't going to really make any money that way, right? Space exploration is something that you do fairly infrequently. You don't make a lot of money, and it costs you a lot of money. So we had to come up with something else. We wanted to be in consumer robotics. We wanted something that people could actually buy. So eventually we started working in the oil industry. Down here is actually a piece of a robot that we worked in the oil industry with. And then we came up with the idea of making an actual consumer product that you and I could go to the store to buy. I'm going to send Ava around the far side. and we'll take a look at what that was. So consumer robotics led us to toys. We did a partnership with Hasbro because Hasbro made every toy that anybody has ever heard of. And again, we start with the prototype. And so here, the prototype is this little doll. This is Bit. Bit is fairly ugly. Her face comes off so you can see where all of her gears are, how she would work. We would never sell anything that looks like that. And Bit ends up looking like this as a finished product when we worked with Hasbro. The toy itself was a little doll like this. This is my real baby. She comes out of the box, a brand new little baby. And when I turn her on, she has sensors all over her body and she speaks. So if I were to tickle her tummy or giggle, she laughs with me. She starts talking. And actually, if I put the bottle in her mouth, she knows it's there because she has the sensors. And she starts to ask for more. But she's a happy baby. So she would actually grow with the child. When you bring her out of the box, she has no language. And then the more you play and interact with her, the more language she has. So My Real Baby was fun. That was our first toy. But recognizing that not everybody was going to want a toy doll, we began working on another version of a toy, and that was the Meeps. Meeps are super cute. They have this little furry top. They have hearing sensors on either side of their eyeballs, and they react to the tone of your voice. So if you call the Meep, it runs to you, and if you yell at it, it runs away. Super fun. However, this was our first toy to mass manufacture. We had done prototypes. Hasbro did the manufacturing here. We'd done ones and twos of robots, never thousands and thousands. And so what we learned is that the COGS, the cost of goods in the robot, really, really matters. This guy was 5 cents too much. Hasbro put it back on the shelf and said, no, we're never going to do this, because 5 cents multiplied over thousands of robots begins to add up. So for some, here's a failure, right? We didn't do this. We put all this work in. Now we don't sell the robot. Not here. Everything in this museum is a way we learn. So this guy, we learned about manufacturing. You will see engineers here now debating the cost of one LED in a robot. Does it have to be an RGB LED? Could it be just a white LED? Do we really even need an LED? Because that one LED times millions of Roombas starts to add up. The other thing we learned with the little Meeps was this. Here's the bottom of a Meep. It's a little round robot, 2 wheels and a caster wheel. Lo and behold, it looks an awful lot like a Roomba. And so even though we didn't build this, it taught us everything we needed to know about round robots and set us out on our course for building Roomba later. So that was kind of our dabble into toys. And we let this die a natural death. The partnership ran out because toys, as much as we love them, as much as we kind of wish we were still doing them because it'd be fun, they are not impactful. What is impactful is using your intelligence to do things that really either help people, save lives, something along those lines. And that's where we began to get into the defense and security industry. I'm going to pause here and see if anybody has any questions on our early history with toys, space, or the like. Okay. Defense and security. This is at the time around the Iraq and Iranian wars. So you've got robots that can pick up IEDs, that are doing mine hunting. So we had to fine tune that. We had to figure out how are we going to do that to our best ability. Ironically, it's another toy that taught us a lot of what we needed to know. So over here on the very bottom shelf is the last toy we built, and that's a toy dinosaur named Raptor. And Raptor's fun. It has sensors all over its body. And so the digital skin, as we call it, reacts to how you play with it. So if you're very nice to your dinosaur, it's very calm, happy. But if you start hitting your dinosaur, his eyes turn red, He gets very angry. He starts to roar. You have a mad dinosaur in your house you have to tame and train. But what's interesting about the dinosaur is it's a two-legged walking robot. So you've got a very heavy center middle. That's what we call the center of gravity of a robot, where that it's kind of like your core. We stuck a heavy head on it. So if I take my core and I put a very, very heavy cement block head on it, I'm going to tip over. I'm going to tip forward. So we stuck a really long tail on it that helps balance the robot. And now we invented a two-legged walking robot. What in the world does that have to do with defense and security? Well, we come over here to the PackBot. The PackBot is one of the robots that most people knew us for in defense and security. And if I look at PackBot, not two-legged, but it has a very heavy center of gravity. This middle portion of the robot is very robust. But then I stuck this giant arm on it. The arm extends to about 8 feet. And I put a big camera on it, which means my robot could tip forward. I need to balance the robot. So I put flippers on it. And those flippers not only balance the robot, but they allow the robot to climb a flight of stairs. So this became the first stair climbing robot. How do we arrive at stair climbing? Well, that was the request from DARPA. DARPA is a government funding agency. And they said they wanted people to come with a white paper about how you would build a stair climbing defense robot. And so when we got to the proposal and the other companies showed up and they had a white paper on how they would build a robot. At iRobot, we build things. And so we showed up with a robot and nobody could believe that. They're like, sure, it climbs stairs. And they were like, well, you want to see? And the robot went out and climbed a flight of stairs. We got the contract and that's how we became in a sort of leading in that defense and security area. Why do I tell you that story? Because when you're asked to do things, do it the way that works best for you and go that extra step and prove that you know what you're doing. Everybody could write the paper, but we went ahead and built the prototype and made sure that the paper was going to work. So PackBot's got a gripper, it's got a camera, it's driven with a laptop, and actually use a game controller to drive the robot. This came back to our user experience. The original controller that I can show you later was very complex. It was very difficult. Even the laptop is somewhat challenging. And so somebody in a meeting said, geez, I wish it was like a video game. Lights go on because yes, we could do that. We can get a game controller that's inexpensive, connect it up, and now it's very simple, not only to drive the robot, but to train people to use the robot. If you're in a situation where you're about to defuse a bomb, you really want it to be easy to drive this robot. You don't want to have to think about how you're going to do it. So the user experience here made it such that we could do the training and get people using it quickly. PackBot was used at 9/11. It was inside the buildings doing structural exams to make sure it was safe to enter. Iraq and Afghanistan, it was doing IED disposal, finding IEDs, things like that. And then in Fukushima, after the nuclear plant went down in the tsunami and the hurricane, we sent over both PackBot and the Cobra. Cobra's about 500 pounds, can lift 300 pounds, tow a truck, rip a car door off. Those two robots were able to go over to Fukushima, get inside the nuclear plant, and do the shutdown of the plant and help them clean up. Again, it's about understanding your customer, understanding the robots. We didn't show up and say, hey, we're cool, we can do this for you. We showed up and trained people and let them help us help them. So everything around here is fairly custom in how we do it. So defense and security and the Ava robot that you're on are two things we no longer do. 2016, we spun off those two divisions. They are their own company now. Ava is made by Ava Robotics, and the defense robots are now Teledyne FLIR, but still a huge part of our history and something we're very, very proud of. Again, let me take a second to make sure you have no questions or ask your questions. Anyone? All right, we're going to head on over to Roomba. Roomba's obviously what everybody knows us for. There are over 40 million Roombas out in the world, so it's clearly a fairly popular device. On the top row, when Ava turns, you'll see much of the lineup that we have today. Lots of different models, couple different SKUs, right? They all basically function as a robot vacuum. And on the bottom shelf are those prototypes. Around here, the prototype holds a lot of weight and is very important to our evolution. So on this side, you've got SCAMP. SCAMP is what we call proof of concept. That actually predates a prototype. Proof of concept says, hey, I think I have a super cool idea. I'm not sure it's a super cool idea. I want to check and make sure everybody agrees. So we build this sort of pre-prototype. Everybody agreed. Cleaning in somebody's house makes sense. And so we went ahead and built the prototype here called Dust Puppy. Dust Puppy had an electrostatic cloth on the bottom, kind of like a Swiffer, and would come out and clean. And we thought we were the coolest people on the planet because we had invented this cool sweeping robot. Turns out that people have rugs in their homes. They don't want a sweeping robot. They want a vacuum cleaning robot. For most of you, sweeping robots would be probably about 50% useful, if that. And so we had to come back, put the vacuum in, and that's where you end up with Roomba, which is the vacuum cleaning robot. So the way a Roomba looks is this. That's the front face. You've got one, maybe the two other buttons. Very simple. The button says clean. You know what to do. Again, user interface. On the back, there's that round robot with two wheels and a little caster wheel. The spinning brush throws the dirt underneath, goes in between these rollers. Everything lands itself in the little dirt bin, which I can then shake out and empty in the trash when I'm done. And my robot has cleaned the house. A couple people thought, well, why do I have to empty it if it's an autonomous robot? That makes no sense. It should do all that itself. So we built another dock here, has a vacuum bag in the inside. The robot rolls up, empties itself into the bin. About every 30 days, I have to change out the vacuum bag. Much, much easier. The robot's using lots of sensors. It has sensors underneath, infrared, that tell it whether it's on a flat surface. Last thing we want is the robot tumbling downstairs. So if it gets to an edge, the robot knows and spins around. The bumper acts as a sensor, so if it bumps, it knows to move away. And then it's actually using infrared here to pair up with its dock and bring itself back home. So when the robot's all done, I don't have to remember to charge it. It just goes back. It's recharging. Most of the robots that we build today have cameras. And so with a camera, we've now gone to visual docking. So we put a QR code on the dock, and the robot uses that camera to bring itself back to the dock and again recharge. The other thing we've done is to put all the robots on Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. So how does that work? Well, if I want to vacuum, I bring up the app. There's my robot ready to go. And I can vacuum in my house whenever I want. When the robot's all done, it actually gives me a map of the space that it vacuumed. So I can see that it did most of the room. I've actually divided this room into two parts, so I can do half and half. That little red square at the bottom there, that's a keep out zone. I don't want this robot to leave the room. Or maybe I put it by my dog bowls. So I have a lot of control of what I can do with the robot simply by using the app and that connectivity. So I'm going to bring you over and hopefully show you a demo of how the robot works. We'll see if everything's working today. So this is one of our newest robots, came out about a month ago. This is the J7 Plus Combo. So what makes this robot different is a couple things. It's got a pad on the back here that's going to come down, and it detects whether it's on a hard surface or on a rug. If it's on a hard surface like this floor, the robot's going to mop. So it'll put out water, mop with the pad. If it's on the rug, detects that, simply vacuums the space. It has that kind of dock where it's going to roll up and empty itself. And then with the Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, I'm able to also start integrating it into my smart home. I can use Alexa and Google with the robot using my verbal commands to bring it out. I've connected it to a smart bulb in that corner, so when the robot comes out, the lamp should turn red. For a while, the connection actually broke, but there's a Sonos in here. I can have it play a song when the robot finishes. We can do things like smart door locks. When I lock my door, that's a good time for the robot to come out because I'm not home when I lock the door. So I'm going to use the Alexa to call the robot out. We have to be patient because I have multiple robots in here, so it does ask me which one. But hey, Alexa, tell Roomba to start cleaning.
Which robot would you like to use for this job? For Sir Mix-a-Lot, say 1. For J7 Stem 2, say 2. For Moppy Mop, say 3. For Combo, say 4.
1?
Would you like to vacuum the entire space?
Yes.
Okay. I'll tell Sir Mix-a-Lot to start vacuuming.
So it figured out which robot. It's bringing the robot out. You can see that lamp turned red. Again, you would not normally do that, but that's a trick that I have to show the connectivity. The robot doesn't fall off the edge of the platform. It knows that edge is there. Now, right now, it put the mop down so it can mop the floor on the hard surface. And now it's picking it back up and it's going to head over and start to vacuum the rug. So it's using its sensors to determine where it is. I have not finished mapping this space, so it actually is a little more confused than normal. The robot goes in rows. It'll bump off your furniture. Again, it doesn't quite know this area yet, but it does a fairly complete job of vacuuming. When I decide that I've had enough, or the robot itself is finished, it'll go back to the dock and empty itself. I'm going to ask it to stop. Hey, Alexa, tell Roomba to play dead. Hey, Alexa, tell Roomba to play dead. So I had Alexa pause the robot, and I'm going to send it home now using that app. So all I do is bring up the app, and I can just send the robot home. It's turned its little headlight on. It'll go find its dock and do that visual docking. And then it should empty when it gets there. Has to line itself up perfectly to get on that dock, and then it'll empty. Once the robot has emptied itself, it tells me that it's finished, and then the lamp should go off. So the robot has finished. It's shutting down. Hopefully my lamp turns off at some point. There it goes. So that's how that would work. Again, I have the door hooked up such that if I lock the door, the mop comes out, things like that. So all of that is kind of a piece of that smart home. Smart home is sort of where we see ourselves in the future, understanding how the robot fits into the larger picture. The other thing we gave this robot that's a little bit different is artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence means the robot recognizes certain objects. So for instance, we've taught this robot what cables look like on your floor, like your charging cable, because all of us leave one on the floor. The robot knows to avoid it. It knows about shoes, socks, sweatshirts, backpacks. It actually knows what dog poop looks like, because if your dog has an accident, definitely don't want the robot running through it. So giving the robot artificial intelligence has made it smarter, and it hopefully cleans a little bit smarter in your home. Let's come on up here, and then any questions that you might have about Roomba, how it works, what it does. Okay. I have the full lineup behind me. These are pretty much one of every robot through time here. And you can see that that takes a lot of people and a lot of different iterations through time. All different kinds of people work here. Clearly, there's a lot of different kinds of engineers, mechanical, electrical, software, but we have a lot of other positions as well that probably dovetail a little bit more with what you're learning. The software people, can be the software on the robot, the firmware, the connectivity, writing the app, things like that. Data science is pulling all that information from the robots. They come back. The data science, both data science engineers, data scientists themselves are going to examine that information. Things like how long does a robot clean? How much square footage does it do on a run? How long till you have to empty the vacuum bag, so that we can make the robot a little bit smarter? That feeds both our engineers and our marketing people. So it's kind of split in two directions. For the engineers, it's making the robot better. For the marketing people, how do we convince people to buy them based on the data that we have? So marketing and sales, they're working on, how do I sell this? Where do I sell it? Working with our distributors, working with our warehouses. We have an entire ops and logistics team who are making sure the robots get from the factory to the warehouse to the stores. Working with some of our partners like Best Buy and Amazon, things like that. Obviously, we have a web team, a legal team, accounting, lawyers, every job that you can think of could potentially work here. So we like people to think a little bit more about, well, what do I like to do? And could that be a job at a tech company? Before you kind of limit yourself and say, well, I went into this position, career that could never be in tech. People here also come from a wide variety of backgrounds. Very few people left college knowing that I'm going to work at a robotics company and landed at a robotics company. We have a lot of people from Bose. We have people, from HubSpot, from they come at it from all different directions, including we have some psychology people, right? The interaction of how does a human use a robot? That's super important to us. Our design people are all thinking about what does this robot look like? When we finish a product, it's thinking about, does it need a handle, right? Is that handle blue? How do I put the icon on the little part that takes the water so that actually to put the water in there? That's a big part of these robots. The simplicity and making them do the job that they do. The other huge piece, obviously, is coding. Coding is in everything that we do, between the strict software to, I like to remind people that when you use Microsoft, like Word or Excel, that's coding. Certainly Excel with the formulas, but if any of you have ever tried to do like tables or table of contents in Microsoft Word, you know that you really need to be almost a rocket engineer to make that work. So it's really all in the, all encompassing. The other skill that a lot of people never think about that we use a lot is presentation. So making PowerPoints, writing an email that's coherent, doing a presentation in a meeting, because if I come up with a great idea, I need to be able to convince everybody else that it's a super cool idea. So that could be as simple as a sketch, but very often, it's going to be a verbal presentation. So let's pause here and see what questions you guys have, what I can answer, and how to make us seem more accessible for you. And then there's a couple more robots if you do want to see those. And I can check, just make sure there's nothing in the chat. Okay. All right. Without any questions, let me just take you over here. I'm passing by some of our educational robots. I wanted to show you two others. These are actually some prototypes of Ava, which is the robot that you're on. What was really interesting to us is that we tried putting arms on Ava. These are 3D printed. We made the 3D printed arms, we made the grippers, but what we learned was that it was very useful for other things in the office. We have a job here called testing, systems test, things like that. People test the robots before they go out as a final design. When you're testing them, that could mean pushing a button over and over. It could mean dropping it. It could mean touching a handle, all sorts of repetitive tasks. Well, far more better suited for a robot arm. And so once we realized that, we started buying robot arms. We're not going to make them, but this became a really nice way for our test engineers to sort of automate the testing that they're doing. So there's 4 or 5 of these arms now in the back, testing and doing the different jobs with the robots. Testing is a huge piece of what we do. And again, those are from all different kinds of careers and what they're looking for. They're looking at both usability and the function of the robot. Finally, this is SeaGlider. SeaGlider was a partnership with the University of Washington. We made the robot many years ago. It's an underwater robot. You can see it's sort of shaped like a torpedo. Goes in the water for months at a time. It's shifting weight from nose to tail. Glides through the current. It's actually a glider. It is not a motorized robot, but it glides through the current. The robot was able to go in the water for months at a time. It pops up, sends its data back through the antenna. But doing things like the salinity, the temperature, what's happening in that water. This particular robot was used in the Gulf of Mexico. After the giant oil spill with BP, the robot was able to go into the water, determine how big that spill was, where the spill was, and help out, proving that BP had a little job on their hands. Hi. So that is about 30 years of robotics history in a fairly quick span. What kind of questions do you guys have? Are there careers? Are there things you're thinking of going into? Let me navigate out of the sun. We want you guys to think of us as a resource. I should touch on, we do have an internship and co-op program here. Pretty much every department or every area of the company has at one point an intern or a co-op. Co-ops go typically January through July and then August through September. August through December. That's would have been short. We have a few summer positions. There are quite a few posted already for the summer. If you wanted to work at iRobot, you do need to think ahead. This is the time to be applying for summer jobs. Co-ops here do work like a normal employee. We don't have you just making coffee and making copies. You are treated as an employee and doing that kind of work. But I know we've had quite a few Bentley co-ops, in our finance area and the business area, and quite a few grads who have been here as well. So definitely something to consider. The job could potentially be remote, but we're slowly seeing people come back to the office. All right, questions. How can we help?
Zoe, tell us something you learned today that you didn't know, or a comment. I see you unmuted. Pipe your camera on so we can see you. There you are. Hi. You're muted though. And then Tara, I'll call on you next. So think of a question or a comment or a reaction to the campus, the virtual tour that you saw.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, gotcha.
Oh, perfect. Okay. Yeah, so I was really interested in how all of the different industries and departments that you said came into tech. Like you said, there was finance and there's marketing and there's psychology and things like that. Like, how do you see a lot of that in the future? Like, do you see more people from broader industries coming in and not it just be like people who are in data analytics and things like that? Like, how are you guys going to attract people from those different departments?
So they've always been here. one of the guys who was, gosh, what did he do? User design, I think, user experience. He was a furniture designer, but read the job post. This is what we ask you to do. When you read a job post, do not approach it where it has, like, let's say it has 6 bullet points, right? And you look at it and you're like, oh, I only have 2 of those 6 bullet points. I shouldn't apply. No, apply for the job. Because A, you don't know which of those bullet points is most important. B, maybe that's enough. And C, you have some other skill that wasn't on the bullet point that we want. So furniture design comes in, he has no experience in robots, but he understands how somebody uses something. That's incredibly important to us. Our design researcher is a psychology background. Why? Because what she does is sit down with people in a room, show them a beta robot, and be like, what do you think? But she knows how to elicit information and ask questions and analyze it from that sort of human side of things. We draw from all those skills because humans are using all the technology. So never, never, never limit yourself. I had never seen a Roomba, never touched a robot before I started working here. Now my whole job is teaching about them, which is kind of crazy, but that's okay. But yeah, I definitely think you will see a ton of diverse careers. Who else has a question?
Emma, let's call on you. Tell us something you learned today or a question you might have for Lisa. We're going to give everybody a chance. I'll call on everybody, ask everybody together for a quick feedback or a question or something you learned that you didn't know about that you thought was kind of cool. Grace?
Hi.
Hi, Grace. What'd you think?
I thought the presentation was very cool. My main question would probably just like be concerning like daily life of your job, like what you do every day, maybe like hours or if you have a certain routine.
Do you mean me or the average employee here?
Whichever one, you can do both.
So I think
Lisa is above average.
no, not really. Things are very different now. It's very much, like you are in school where, well, that's changing too, but think to early pandemic, right? Where maybe you go to your class and then go back to your room, where people can come in now to work for, let's say 10 to 2. There's very little of the 8 to 5 lifestyle anymore as being pervasive. So we have quite a few employees working from home. I would say there's about maybe a quarter of the company comes in here every day. But there's a lot more flexibility to everybody's job, which I think is fantastic. That's what we want, right? My job is very unique in that I deal a lot with external partners. So talking to people like you, talking to schools, right? I spend 90% of my day on email when I'm not doing stuff here in the office. Other people might be a very hands-on job, right? The testing people have been here throughout the pandemic. They've been working on site, working with the robots. Other people, maybe they're home writing code all day. So it does really differ, and it's far less structured now, so you can kind of make it your own way to do it.
Yeah, I just thought it was really interesting learning that iRobot did like defense. I never really knew that, and learning about that was pretty cool.
Cool. Yeah, we do miss the defense and security stuff. Was really important to us, but we couldn't focus on 3 areas at once.
Thank you. Abigail, would you like to make a comment or a question?
I was just gonna ask, like you were talking about like the iRobot vacuum, like my family has that, and I was just wondering like how do you see that evolving in the future and what other technologies will become like primary in those type of industries?
I think the robot itself is getting smarter. I think you'll keep seeing the robot get smarter. Adding artificial intelligence was a huge leap. And then seeing how it integrates into your smart home, right? How does Alexa use the map that we have? We're the only people with a map of your house, right? Alexa doesn't know where it is. You named it living room, but it has no idea where the living room is. So now with a map, you can start seeing all those devices and having them communicate a little bit better. So that smart home's really important to us.
Zach, what about you? A comment or a question? Or something you learned? We'll go to Sam and then Emma, so guys get ready. Sam, a comment or a question from you? Emma, a question or a comment from you?
I just thought that was very interesting how like there's so many different types that they have and like how we use them in our lives, such as like the vacuum.
It's as simple as a vacuum, but it really makes a huge difference.
Olivia, and then Luciano.
Yeah, I was very just surprised at like the versatility because honestly, like when we saw the dolls at the beginning, I never really would have expected dolls to have like robots in them. I never really thought about that. But what I found was really interesting was the artificial intelligence. Do you think you guys will be adding that to a lot more products as time goes on?
I think, yeah, I mean, this is the newest robot. I think you'll see it either infiltrate down or just the robots that we bring out in the future will all have that ability. It makes the robot so much smarter for it to, it sees a cable on the floor and turns around.
Luciano, then Bridget and Keldon. Hey, Luciano.
One fact that I remember hearing was that you guys had around 40 million Roombas around the country. And I think that kind of just demonstrates that in the future, we're going to be growing up around robots. And especially with this AI boom, I think it's going to kind of just almost take over our lives. I mean, robots, especially with artificial intelligence, are going to be extremely helpful. And although it may be a little controversial how much we're going to be able to depend on them, I think that it is definitely going to benefit our lives.
Well said. First of all, great catch, because I slipped that in very quickly. But I think they are going to be, that's our whole goal, is to make it a seamless part of your life. It shouldn't be, that you have to think about the robot. The robot should just be a part of your house. Your house should just be a part of being a robot. So that's kind of where we're at. But
Definitely.
yeah, you're absolutely right.
Thank you. Sam, if you have a question, you're welcome to go at the end. We'll go to Brigitte and then Calden next. We're giving everybody a turn. So we'll call on you. And once again, I'll remind you before you go to click on the QR code before me or behind me and let us know that you're here by taking the attendance survey. That's on the screen on the QR code behind me or at the link that I put in the chat. Who's next? Brigitte.
This was already talked about a bit, but I thought that defense and security was really interesting. Like, I had no idea that they were used for things like 9/11 in Afghanistan and Fukushima. I just thought that was really interesting.
It was a very interesting time. I was not here for 9/11. I do know that we got so the robots themselves were obviously funded by DARPA, a government agency. They knew we had them. Robots weren't finished yet, but we got a call saying, hey, could you bring them to New York City the morning after the bombing? And within 24 hours, we had people in New York City, with the supplies they need and all of that. It was fairly dramatic and pretty impressive. Fukushima was somewhat the same, where we had people volunteer to go overseas to Japan in a nuclear zone with the robots. So it's a very special person that works here too, that's willing to do all of that.
Bridget, do you see yourself being that person?
I don't know if I'm that person, but
Could you see yourself doing that job?
possibility. I don't know what I want to do, so maybe.
Well, there's a job you may not have thought about. Thank you for your question. Calden, what about you?
Yeah, I have a comment, and it was just like relating back to like all the prototypes and stuff, and kind of how it related back to like life in general and stuff. Just understanding like where you start is not always where you're gonna finish, and I kind of like super interested in like the different prototypes and how each one was better than the other, and where you guys are right now.
Prototyping is huge here. So the robot starts with just a very rough prototype, maybe 3D printed, maybe made out of cardboard, it doesn't matter. And then it proceeds into manufacturing prototypes. So that goes through about 3 engineering prototype rounds at least. And then, you know, you're still getting first builds out of the factory and we check those. So there's a lot around. That's why it takes 2 to 3 years to get a new product out.
Megan.
So since it's Women's History Month, I was wondering what it's like being a woman in STEM.
That's a great question. It's a little of a hot button for me. So I would say it's certainly better than it was. So when my background is engineering, I worked in an engineering firm in downtown Boston, my first 7 years of my career. And at that time, I was one of 3 women that I know of in the company. And, you had to kind of play along. And I never had an issue because the guys befriended me. I was fine. I was very fortunate. But it's certainly a lot better now, but it doesn't mean that everybody has to stop progressing. I'm sure there's still people out there who, their first thought is, oh, you're a woman and you're in this. Why? But you have to come in with the attitude of I'm an engineer or I'm an accountant or I'm a whatever. The fact that I'm a woman in that field is only secondary. You are whatever you are. But that's my personal opinion, but I think it's definitely improving, but we have to keep a voice going.
Megan, thank you for that question. Rachel, what about you?
What these do is they basically model the set.
Hey, Rachel.
Oops, I think I lost you guys.
Like this one here.
Rachel, come back when you're ready. I saw you unmuted. Let's go to Sinai.
It will stay in even as I drag down the drag.
Hello. I just have a question. Like, how do you think this will progress, like, sustainability-wise in the future?
In what way? I mean, the robots themselves, as long as we can source parts, we can make them. We do have to continue to look at alternative parts, making sure that the parts themselves are available. The robots themselves, we always are looking at what they're made from. Can they be recycled? Can they be disposed of properly? Things like that.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Jack. Or Sam. I think they're the last 2 we didn't get to. And Rachel had some unmuting problems. So Sam, go ahead.
Yeah, I just have a quick question. So what are you guys doing differently to stand out from your competitors currently?
I think it's the belief that our robot is smarter and better. We've put 30 years into this, so we kind of know what we're doing at this point. And just making the robot a little bit more intelligent, that artificial intelligence stuff, knowing how to communicate with the robot. The app is always improving. If you start to use the app now, it's just a tremendous improvement over where it was 3 years ago. So I think a lot of that too. And you think about everything you do with an app now. But everything around here is all about how do we stand out? How do we make it better?
Jack has trouble with his mic, but he asked me if you think AI will take over our jobs, and if so, which jobs are at risk?
I do not. When we did the defense and security work, we always said there has to be a human in the loop. Somebody always has to design the robot. So even for us buying, for instance, the robot arms that now do a lot of our testing, we still have to program those arms. We still have to put the arms together, build them, still have to have the testing set up so that the robot can test it, right? So there's always a need for a job. I think you'll see the robots do those repetitive tasks that are really kind of brainless. Having interns come in here all summer just to push a button for 8 hours is kind of ridiculous. But now if we can have the intern program that robot that does it, now you've got a great job.
That's exactly what Rachel's question was, is what kind of experience is required or recommended for internships? And where do you go to find out about applying for them?
Sure. So experience obviously depends on the job you're applying for. We're looking usually for somebody sophomore year and up. Tell us though also what you've done, right? Don't give me a resume that says you took calculus and accounting 101. Tell me what you did with that. Did you do a project? Did you do a paper? Are you in a club? That's what's going to set you apart and make me, more interested in you. Tell us about your outside projects, things like that. All of that's posted on our career page. So it's careers.irobot.com. And then you kind of just have to scroll through to find the button that says search all jobs or something. But I would definitely take a look. If you have questions, get in touch with me. I'm happy to connect you with our recruiter and see how we can help for you.
Do you want to tell me your email address? I'll put it in chat for them.
They can just message stem@irobot.com.
Okay, stem@irobot.com.
That's easy to remember.
I'll put it in chat, stem@irobot.
Yep, that all comes to me, and I'm happy to help.
Is there anybody who I forgot who has one last word before we go? If not, I want to thank you guys for coming. I want to thank Lisa for the tour and for staying